She raised 3 children who were not hers,
Wait, she
fed
is
them,
right over here.
clothed them, stayed up with them through fevers and nightmares, attended
Believe this
every school
belongs to
event,
you.
prayed over every exam, watched them grow into adults she was proud of. And when those adults decided she was too much trouble to keep close, she never said a word against them. Not one word. For 15 years. This is the story of Rose Mensah and what she left behind for the people who left her behind first. Drop a comment right now and tell us where in the world you are watching from. And if you are not yet subscribed to Turning Point Tales, hit that subscribe button now. Because this story is going to stay with you long after it ends. Rose Mensah was 63 years old when her son and daughter-in-law died in a car accident. It was a Wednesday morning in March. David was 11, Sarah was 9, Michael was 6. The social worker came to the house, spoke to Rose quietly in the kitchen while the children sat in the living room, not fully understanding what had just changed. Rose listened to everything the social worker said. Then she said, "They are staying with me." Not a question, not a discussion, a statement. The social worker said there were processes, forms, assessments. Rose said, "Then let us begin." 3 weeks later, the children were legally in her care. David was 11 years old, and the first night he cried, Rose sat on the edge of his bed until he fell asleep. She did that for 4 months, every night, until the nightmares stopped. Sarah needed different things. She needed quiet and consistency. The same dinner at the same time, the same routine every morning. Rose learned that within 3 weeks and never broke it. Michael was 6 and still small enough to be carried. Rose carried him everywhere for 2 years. She was 63 years old, and she carried a 6-year-old everywhere he needed to go because he needed it, and she was there. And that was enough of a reason. She was a retired school teacher. Her pension was not large. She had savings she had spent 30 years building. Those savings went to 3 school uniforms, 3 pairs of shoes, groceries, a tutor for David when he was struggling in maths, new glasses for Sarah, a doctor's visit for Michael's ear infection that turned out to be 4 doctor's visits. She did not complain. She did not track what she spent or keep a running total of what she gave. She simply gave. The way people give when they love without condition. The children grew up. David became an engineer. Sarah became a pharmacist. Michael went into finance. Rose attended every graduation. She wore her good dress to each one. The same dress, blue with small white flowers, because she could not afford a new one for each ceremony, and she did not care. She sat in the audience with her hands in her lap and watched 3 people she had raised walk across stages they had earned. She cried at all 3. Happy tears. The kind you cry when you spent 11 years working toward a moment and it arrives exactly as you hoped. Then they married. David married first. His wife was a woman named Linda, polished, precise, particular about things. Linda was not unkind to Rose. She was simply efficient about her. She managed Rose the way she managed everything in her life that required maintenance. Sarah's husband was quieter about it. He said the right things, asked polite questions. But there was always something slightly distant in how he looked at Rose, like she was a problem that had not yet been fully solved. Michael's wife was the most direct. She told Michael 6 months into the marriage that the visits to Grandma were becoming too frequent, that they had their own life to build. Michael said, "She raised me." His wife said, "And you are grateful for that, but you cannot live your life looking backwards." He did not argue. He rarely argued. It started small. The visits that used to be every 2 weeks became once a month. Once a month became every few months. Every few months became birthdays. And birthdays became not always. Rose noticed. She did not say anything. She made tea when they came, put out biscuits, asked about their lives, listened to the answers, and when they left earlier than they used to, she walked them to the door and said, "Drive safe. I love you." Every time. She never forgot to say it. Then came the conversation. David started it because David was the oldest and he had always been the one to start difficult things. He came alone on a Saturday afternoon, sat at her kitchen table, his hands around a cup of tea he was not drinking. He said, "We have been talking, the three of us." Rose waited. He said, "There is a place, a very good place. Staff who are trained for this, people your age, activities, medical support nearby." Rose looked at her grandson. She said, "A nursing home." He said, "It is not. It is a residential care facility. It is different." Rose said, "Is it?" David looked at his tea. He said, "We worry about you here alone." Rose said, "I have been alone before." He said, "Grandma, we have our own families now, our own responsibilities." She looked at him, the boy who cried every night for 4 months, the boy she had sat with until he fell asleep, every night, for 4 months. She said, "I know you do." She said, "Let me see this place." She saw it. It was clean. The staff were kind. The rooms were small but had windows. She said, "All right." David said, "Grandma." She said, "I said, all right, David." She moved in on a Tuesday in October. The three of them helped carry her things. She brought her photographs, her Bible, her blue dress with the white flowers, her writing things, and a small box of letters she had been keeping since before the children were born. She set everything up herself, arranged her photographs on the small dresser, put her Bible on the bedside table. When they were ready to leave, she walked them to the entrance, hugged each of them, said, "Drive safe. I love you." The same words, every time. She watched their cars leave from the window. Then she turned around, went to the common room, sat down beside an elderly woman she had never met, said, "My name is Rose." The woman said, "I am Eleanor." And that was how it began. Eleanor had been at the home for 3 years. She had a dry sense of humor and an opinion about everything and laughed loudly enough to bother the people 2 rooms over. Rose loved her within a week. They had breakfast together every morning, sat in the garden every afternoon that wasn't raining, played cards with 2 other women on Thursday evenings, watched the same program on television every Sunday, and argued about it every Monday. Rose was not unhappy. That is the part that is hardest to explain. She was not sitting in misery counting the days between visits. She was living, genuinely, fully, with the particular grace of someone who has decided that their circumstances do not get to determine their character. She ran the book club, organized the birthday celebrations for other residents, wrote letters to the families of people who had no one coming to see them. The staff knew her by name within a month. By the end of the first year, the home felt like something she had built. But she still wrote. Every birthday, every Christmas. She wrote to David and Sarah and Michael. She wrote about what she was reading, what Eleanor had said that made her laugh, what the garden looked like that week. She wrote about how proud she was of them. She wrote, "I hope you are happy. That is all I ever wanted. That is all I still want." She sealed every envelope, wrote their names on the front, and never sent them. She did not want them to feel obligated. She did not want them to visit out of guilt. She just needed somewhere to put the love that had nowhere else to go. So it went into envelopes, and the envelopes went into a box she kept under her bed. 15 years. Outside the nursing home, the world kept moving. David's company expanded, and then contracted, and then expanded again. Then the market shifted in ways he had not anticipated. 3 bad decisions in succession. The business collapsed. He lost everything he had built. Sat in an empty office on a Friday evening, thinking about where it had all gone. He thought about his grandmother. Sarah's marriage ended on a Tuesday morning. Her husband moved out while she was at work, left a note on the kitchen counter. She came home to a half-empty house and a note and the specific silence of a space that used to hold someone. She thought about her grandmother. Michael's youngest child became very sick, a diagnosis that the doctors were careful about. Weeks of uncertainty that felt like years. He sat in a hospital waiting room at 2 a.m. and thought about the one person who had always sat with him through the hard things. He thought about his grandmother. They called each other within the same week, without knowing the others had been thinking it. David called Sarah. Sarah called Michael. Michael said, "We need to go and see Grandma." They agreed without an argument. The first time in years, they drove together. David and Sarah and Michael in the same car for the first time in a very long time. They did not talk much on the way. There was not much to say yet. They arrived at the home on a Thursday afternoon. The woman at the front desk looked up, said, "Can I help you?" David said, "We are here to see Rose Mensah. She is our grandmother." The woman's expression changed. She said, "I am so sorry." She said, "Mrs. Mensah passed away 3 weeks ago." The three of them stood at the front desk. Nobody spoke. David said, "3 weeks?" She said, "Yes." She went peacefully, in her sleep. Eleanor was with her. 3 weeks. They had been 3 weeks too late. The funeral had already happened. Eleanor had organized it, with the staff, with the residents who had loved Rose. There were flowers, and photographs, and people who had known her for 15 years. None of them had been there. They stood in the car park afterward. Sarah said, "She did not call us." David said, "She would not have wanted to worry us." Michael said nothing. He was looking at the building. He said, "Finally, she was in there for 15 years, and we were here, just here, outside, living our lives. 3 weeks too late." Eleanor found them. She came out of the main entrance with a box under her arm. She was in her 80s now, smaller than she used to be, but her eyes were exactly as sharp as Rose had described. She said, "You must be the grandchildren." She said it without judgment, just recognition. David said, "Yes." Eleanor said, "She talked about you every day," she said, "every single day, for 15 years. She held out the box, said, "She wanted you to have this. She told me so, a long time ago." She said, "If anything happens to me before they come, make sure they get the box." They took the box, sat in the car park on a bench, opened it together. Inside, 15 years of birthday cards, one for each of them, every year. Their names written carefully on the front. Letters, dated. Some of them several pages long. Photographs of them, their graduations, their weddings. Pictures she must have asked them to send over the years or found some other way to obtain. She had kept every single one, a diary, small, brown cover, worn at the corners. David opened it. The pages were full. Not complaints, not grief, prayers for David's business, for Sarah's marriage, for Michael's children, prayers for their health, their happiness, their peace, page after page. 15 years of praying for the people who had not visited. And at the very back of the box, one final note, written in her handwriting. The letters slightly larger now than they used to be. It said, "If you are reading this, do not blame yourselves. I forgave you long ago. I know you were busy building your lives. That was all I ever wanted for you, to build something good. You were never a burden to me, not for one single day. And I was never unhappy. I had Eleanor. I had the garden. I had my books, and I had all of you in here." She had drawn a small circle over her heart. "Thank you for giving me the privilege of being your grandmother. All my love, always, Rose." Michael closed the note. The three of them sat in that car park for a long time. not speaking. Because some things take time to become words, and some things never do. They established the foundation 6 months later. The Rose Mensa Foundation. Its purpose: to ensure that no elderly person in a residential care facility spends their birthday without a visitor, without a card, without someone who knows their name. They funded it themselves. David, Sarah, Michael, together. They visited the home every month, not out of guilt, because they understood something now that they had not understood before. That presence is not a sacrifice. It is a privilege. Rose had told them that in a note they read 15 years too late. But they heard it, and they spent the rest of their lives making sure other people heard it too, before it was too late. Eleanor came to the foundation launch. She sat in the front row. At the end, she found David. She said, "Your grandmother would have been embarrassed by all this fuss." She said, "But she would have been glad you finally understood." David said, "We should have understood sooner." Eleanor said, "Yes." She said, "But you are here now." She looked at him the way Rose must have looked at them at the end of every visit. She said, "Drive safe." She said, "She told me to tell you that. If I ever saw you, drive safe. I love you." David could not speak. Eleanor patted his hand, turned, walked back to her seat. Some people love you past the point where they have any reason to. Past the distance, past the silence, past 15 years of unanswered letters they never even sent. Rose Mensa loved 3 people like that, every single day, until the last one. And when they finally came to tell her they were sorry, she had already made sure they would know she forgave them before they arrived, because that was who she was, from the very beginning to the very end. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video and subscribe to Turning Point Tales. We will see you in the next one.